You. I've got my fancy camera on today rather than just talking into my phone. Starting to feel better. C-section number 11 is now a little more than 2 weeks behind me. And here's little baby Corey, who's doing so good. And she's all full of milk. So she's just going to be a little warm pack for me while I share from my heart today. I had a message come through just this morning from a lovely woman in my Big Family Moms group, and I'm going to read a portion of it to you, and I'm going to unpack it with you today. So here's what it's about. She said, Tara, can I ask you a personal question? You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I really want to. Here's what it is. How do you handle seeing other people get VBACs? I got so triggered yesterday seeing someone else get their dream home birth. I realized I'm so angry with God for it, wondering why he won't give me what my heart desires. It makes me so sad. I can completely relate. I have only had C-sections, and without getting into like the whole story of how that all happened, it just, I tried VBACs all the way up until baby number 5. And I've experienced the whole gamut of jealousy, of seeing other people have dream home births. There's someone in my family who maybe is going to catch this live, and God bless you, who has only had like relatively easy births that are now home births. And so, I mean, it's not that person's fault in any way. It kind of has nothing to do with them. I love what was said in this message, that it really is between me and God, right? This is an issue between me and God. It has nothing to do with anyone else, with their VBAC experience or their C-section experience, or how many kids they've had, or how those kids came into their life or out of their body or into their home, whether they adopted or anything. Because like in the big family mom world, there's many different ways that our children come to us. Sometimes it's through adoption, through birth. Sometimes a nice, easy peasy vaginal birth, and sometimes it's through a different road, which is the road I'm going to talk to today, what I call cesarean road. So what do you do when you experience painful jealousy and sadness? You're watching other people get what your heart desires, which would be a dream home birth. And I get it, because I always wanted this dream birth where I would, in my mind, I had this fantasy that I would start to bake a chocolate cake. I would go into labor, and like it says in the books, it would slowly begin to build. And I know within 7 to 10 hours, I would have baked and frosted a chocolate cake and given natural birth. And be holding my baby in my bed, and the angels would be singing, and everything would be great. However, try as I may, and as much as other people have said, well, if you had only done what, this secret sauce, if you had only known this magical thing, if you had only, trusted God more, then you would have gotten what your heart desires. So there's been, that's another talk for another time, of dealing with people who are very pro VBAC and sometimes have a hard time, in my opinion, respecting the choice to stay on the cesarean road, which is not an easy road to walk. And without getting into it, and I would appreciate so much if you're like super pro VBAC and you're like, no, it's okay, you can always VBAC. Speaking for myself, I did come to a point where I chose to rest in trusting God with future cesareans, and up until 10 cesareans, which I just had a few weeks ago. That is no light or easy choice. And it sometimes can be hard when there's pressure from VBAC advocates who say, they always know of somebody who's had a VBAC after 9 or a VBAC after 7. They always know somebody somewhere. However, there's a fair amount of data that indicates there are a number of risks associated with VBACs after a certain point. I talked it out with my OBGYN, who I respect very much. I looked at the available data, and my husband and I prayed about it and came to our decision for us. That being said, once we've made the decision, I still had to walk through the emotional journey of not getting what my heart desired. And sometimes I think we take that verse from Proverbs, trust in the Lord with all your heart and he will give you the desires of your heart. Almost like a guaranteed wish list. Like, if I desire it, it will come to pass. We read about verses of ask for whatever ask for whatever it is that you want, and God will grant it to you. And I'm paraphrasing from Matthew. And yet at the same time, God's not a genie. That's the way I look at it. And I tell my kids, it's like, God's not a genie. We can't just necessarily just give him like a wish list, like a Santa Claus, and he's just going to grant it. I tend to lean more into, like Jesus said, if there is any way that what I desire to come to pass, speaking of Gethsemane, God, I'm gonna be totally honest, that's my heart's desire. And that was my position with every VBAC that I tried. And I really tried. So I say no to any kind of intentional or unintentional shame or guilt trip when people just like, you should have tried harder. You should have gone one more time. You should have. I have chosen to trust God on this road. And when I see other women experiencing my dream birth, it does bring up sadness. So I totally get the sadness. And here's how it usually happens. So step one is usually an experience of anger. And it's like the form of jealous anger. You're like, oh, God, why not me? What have I done to deserve this? Like, I'm trusting you with this big family. I'm raising children as a blessing. For crying out loud, I'm even homeschooling if I want to put like a gold sticker on my chart of merit. Not that it is, but you know how we play it with God sometimes, and we're like, I long for this. It's a good thing that I desire. Why won't you give it to me? Because this is a hard road. Don't you want to make it easier? Aren't you a good father that gives good gifts to their children? I mean, that's for me been the heart of my accusation against God as my father when I really took time to unpack it. So, step one, here's my advice. You're like, what do I do? I totally get it, Tara. I would recommend you just take a moment and sit down quietly with the Lord. You don't need a long time to do this. Just take a moment, breathe, just kind of let yourself feel your feelings. Let yourself feel the depth of your anger, the depth of your sadness. It's okay. God can handle it. And just take that moment before you go to a mom's group, before you go maybe even to your friends or even to your husband to share, though that has its place to share and to, vent and unpack with trusted confidants. But even before you go there, go get alone with God, who knows, who sees you already, who sees you in your hot mess of emotions, and just let yourself sit with those emotions just for a bit. Let yourself have them instead of pretending they're not there or they're not a big deal or feeling guilty. And then here's what I would recommend you do. Start to sort of unpack them, or if you will, almost like layers, because it does come in layers. Usually it's anger first. We just feel the heat of jealous anger. But when I've taken time to just sit quietly with the Lord, and not a long time, just an intentional time, and I've been like, what is going on in me? Why am I so furious with my sister-in-law or my, this other woman over there who just had a dream birth? And it's not their fault. It has nothing to do with them. It's everything to do with between me and God. He peels back the first layer and he says, well, let's take a look at what's under here. And there's sadness, right? There's sadness. I didn't get that good thing. And vaginal birth is safer, better. Like, I can argue the VBAC case. And there came a point when I chose to stay on the C-section road. And there was no easy decision to make. So underneath the sadness, though, when I go a little deeper and I'm like, of course I'm sad. I understand why I'm sad. But how do I get rid of this sadness so I don't stay in this place and always be angry with you and triggered every time somebody shares their birth story? Every post I see in a mom's group of another baby that came after an easy peasy 2-hour vaginal birth at home, and then they ate chocolate cake. And I'm, recovering from a C-section from multiple days in the hospital, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, underneath the sadness was fear. And this is the heart of what I wanted to get to. Underneath the sadness is typically a root of fear. And fear always leads to control. It always leads to some level of control, which might come out in different ways: emotional control, physical control, spiritual control. But I want to talk about the fear. And it can be different for different people, like what exactly we're afraid of. But usually, if you just take a moment and say, God, what is underneath all of this pain? There's some fear. And for me, the fear, well, there's a couple fears when I really unpacked it with the Lord. Like I said, this was probably a 5-minute process. So it doesn't have to be super time consuming just because it's very intense and personal and meaningful. So to encourage you, in a big family life, you don't have to take a lot of time to get with the Lord and just say, hey, would you just deal with me and just help me through this and reveal what's going on in my heart? Lord, help me, because I'm really struggling with these emotions and they're blinding me. They're keeping me up at night. This comparison is the thief of joy. It really is. And for me, I was afraid. I was afraid that my body would fall apart. I was afraid that I would be ugly and not sexy or attracted to my husband anymore. I was afraid that I would have health complications for my whole life and, that whole lower abdominal area. I was afraid of a number of things. And when I took those fears to the Lord, I started to name them. They lost the almost death grip on me, because then I could see them in light of God's character. I could see them almost stacked up beside God's goodness. And then almost like doing a heart gardening exercise, and you take out the weeds and then you got this empty hole, and we filled it up. And then I just asked the Lord to begin to fill that place of fear in my heart where those roots of fear had really taken hold, and to fill them up with truth. And what he began to put in was reminding me so sweetly through his word of, for example, Romans 8:28, that he works all things together for good, even hard roads, even roads we never wanted. It wasn't the desire of my heart or my life plan to be a C-section mom, but he has blessed me with 11 children, earthside. He has blessed me and entrusted me as a mom, speaking for myself and my husband, to raise up these children. So he just reminded me, I'm working it all out. It's almost like you look at a tapestry and you look at the back end of it, it's so messy and gross, like all the threads. But when you flip it around, it's a beautiful picture, and it all works together. And it's a mystery how my sort of unfulfilled desires, my desire for VBAC, which at this point will not come to pass. And I'm resting in that. I'm okay with that. It's been a journey. Just resting in God's goodness and his character, and letting his word that he was speaking to me in that moment really wash over me was very healing, very grounding, and has helped me when I've experienced moments since then of feeling that jealousy, that triggering emotion. It hasn't been as intense, and I can see that it's almost like a wound that's healing. It's like getting better, and it gets better. So I want to encourage you, if you're catching this live, you're catching this later, you're catching this 10 years from now, and you're like, ooh, Tara, you get me. I have walked through the sadness of not getting what my heart desired, especially if it pertains to a birth story, to VBACs and C-sections. Spend some time with God. Ask him to just kind of unpack and pull back what's going on in your heart to show you what's under the sadness. Because under the pain, there's a root. It may go back to your childhood. It may go back to something someone said. God knows. So you don't have to strain yourself. Just relax. He knows. And maybe it's not time. Maybe he's like, yeah, we've got a little work to do. I'm going to take you on a journey, and we're going to do some heart work, all in good time. So I just want to encourage you to go get alone with your Father, who loves you, who knows you, who accepts you, who's led you to this and will lead you through this. And if you'd like some more help and support in doing that, feel free to pop into the Big Family Moms group. They've got a link below in today's video. I've got other resources because I have walked this road. I've got free stuff to help other moms, whether you're C-section or not, but you're experiencing anything where you're just dealing with fear and anger and jealousy, especially as a big family mom, because it's kind of a unique road to walk, isn't it? Embracing the blessing of children, whether you have 3 or 6 or 11, it's not a competition. You're welcome over there. I call the group Big Family Moms, Overcoming Struggles and Growing in Grace, because that's my heart. I know some moms groups can be toxic and full of all kinds of judgment and all kinds of maybe sometimes some woo. So this is a group I put together with a heart to help other big family moms in a way I wish I'd had help at the beginning, especially when I was first facing a road of VBACs and C-sections and lots of kids and starting to homeschool. And you don't have to be a clone of me if you don't homeschool. It's cool. I'm not like, you have to homeschool or you're a sinner. You have to have VBACs or you're a sinner. Ew, right? Let's give each other some grace as we embrace the blessing of children and go in God's grace together. So I hope this has blessed you today. Let me know in the comments if you've got any other questions, or feel free to PM me if there's something you'd like to ask me about as a big family mom, but maybe you don't want to put it in the group. And then I might do a live about it, or I can message you back. Love to come alongside you and encourage you to overcome big family mom struggles and grow in God's grace. So thanks for meeting with me today. God bless you, and I'll connect with you again in the group or on my live on Monday. Till then, take care.